Hi, Donna, and to your entire book club. Thank you all for reading Finton Moon, my 2011. Actually, it's a 2012 novel. I keep seeing all these reports online that say it was published in 2011, but really it was 2012. So let's start with the truth. This is my lovely wife Jane. I've asked Jane to be part of this short talk about Finton Moon because I just thought it'd be a little bit more natural for her to maybe ask a few questions and just give me somebody to talk to instead of just to the camera. So, hi Jane.
Hi
Say
Gerard,
say
how
hi
are
to
you?
the book club people.
Hello, book club
And
people,
you know
and
Donna.
hello, Donna.
Yeah, you're looking good, Donna. See what you're in for. So, Jane.
So Gerard, so I understand the book club has read your book. So
14 years later, it wasn't math is not my strength. But 14 years later, here we are, still talking about Finton Moon.
Yeah, it's a great book. I confess it is my favorite of yours.
Thank you.
So Gerard,
First
questions first. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspires Finton Moon?
A little bit. I think this was always intended to be my first novel. At the time, I remember saying I wanted it to be my introduction to the world, or the first time the world met my writing was going to be through this character, Finton Moon. But the truth is, I wrote quite a bit before I actually started writing this book. When I left home in Placentia, Newfoundland to go to university. In my first year of university, I wrote a story called The Terror of Finton Moon. It was just a little short story, and it was kind of a horrific little story. And I sent it to Weird Tales magazine, hoping that they might publish the first story I ever wrote. And they wrote back and said it was too weird for them. So I thought, I'm onto something here. Weird Tales thinks that my short story is too weird even for them. So anyway, but I put the story away for quite a few years, and then one day it occurred to me that it'd be a good idea to just start writing this story. I remember saying to my ex-wife at the time that if I start this now, it means I have to give up what I was currently working on. I said I think this novel is going to change my life if I pursue it, and I think after carrying it around all these years, now might be the time. And by carrying it around, I mean, it's quite obvious to me that there's a fair bit of this that draws from my own childhood. It's not autobiographical. I'm sure you could look at this and go, no, this obviously didn't happen, or I doubt that's Gerard's life or whatever. But if you don't know me, perhaps you wouldn't. I don't know. I just know that I came out of my childhood. I came out of Placentia feeling like I'm going to be a writer, or I am a writer, really. And I didn't know it was going to be about a character named Finton Moon. I just knew that I wanted to tell these stories. So I grew up with people who very much resemble the Bridie Batten Hatches and the Sawyer Moons of the world, and the Skeet and the Alicia Dredge and all that sort of thing. And so all of these stories that sort of whirled around in my head, they sort of coalesced into this novel called Finton Moon. And that will be making a long story very short to leave it at that. But
I know I was tempted when I very first read it to think it was autobiographical, but I know now I know you, and
yeah. Well, the thing is that what came before this was a short story collection called Moonlight Sketches, which it actually ended up winning the NL Book Award that year, and Finton Moon got accepted for publication like shortly after that. In fact, the same day I won the award. In fact, I was asked, "Do you have a novel?" And I was like, "Yes, please."
Oh, wow, cool.
Yeah. So there was a big deal, Atlantic Book Awards and all that, and so people were asking us, "So what else you got?" So anyway, my publisher was smart and kind enough to publish this book. I forget what your question was.
Well, I was saying my temptation was to assume that it was quite autobiographical.
Mm.
I mean, I know, having read it, I do remember parts thinking, wow, man, this is just like Gerard as a little boy. It just felt like
Little Gerard, as
yeah.
one poet referred to it as. Yeah, I mean, there are parts. I mean, that's quite a compliment because, I mean, parts of it really are me. A lot of the dialogue, a lot of the conversations are at least inspired by things that happened when I was a kid. Most of it is a mentality, though. It's an attitude that I have in life that I think I brought to the writing of the novel, and Finton Moon became sort of this conduit for these ideas. and we're getting a road cloud today, by the way. We live
We'll
on
have to talk up to be heard over the grader.
we live on a dirt road, and it's just right now it consists of about 1,000 potholes, and today just happens to be the day apparently when they're putting some fresh gravel down. So aren't we lucky? And this is not Newfoundland. We live in New Brunswick, by the way. So yeah, so it's. I think in the early days, after the book came out, I was a bit shy about saying that there's anything autobiographical in here, but the truth is there's a lot. But it is, as I call it, a fairy tale in the sense that, obviously things happen in here that wouldn't necessarily happen in real life. They didn't necessarily happen in my life, but I did want to keep it grounded. The other thing I'll say is I started out writing it in first person. I wanted to capture some of the stories from my childhood, especially as it related to some of these characters who were, very much a part of my life back then. And I just at some point decided that, I think I would serve the story better if I started writing in a third person. So I was about 100 pages in, and I started rewriting it in third person, and that just opened it up for me and allowed me to just write about a character and not feel like I was writing about myself. So that's what took it away from being autobiographical into being more literary, more of an art project, we'll say.
Gave you the distance that you needed.
Yeah, exactly. Critical distance, they call that.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, Gothic, I have heard, and I know you would never say this, but I've heard it said about Gerard that he kind of basically invented Newfoundland Gothic. So can you talk about your interest in the Gothic and how that kind of informed Finton Moon?
I do think the kind of Gothic that I wrote in Finton Moon and also Moonlight Sketches and the Hush Sisters, all three really, I do think there's nothing quite like that in Newfoundland, right? Even now, I don't think there's anything else that's even attempted to be that. There are some stories that have attempted to be ghost stories, or attempted to be horror stories or mysteries or whatever. But when Finton Moon came out, I remember several reviewers, one in particular, saying it's sort of like Stephen King. It's a coming-of-age story, and she was sort of like, I don't think we've seen anything like this before. And that's when I first began to realize that, yeah, maybe it is. I always felt like my voice was a little different. I had a different skew, we'll say, than most people, different slant. I grew up on, the movie I remember most from my childhood was The Brides of Dracula. When I was a kid, staying up late at night watching that. I really should not have been watching that because it was just dark and kind of brutal in a way. But I read all the comic books about Dracula, and I started reading Edgar Allan Poe and all sorts of stuff. Even I remember being 12 years old and reading A Midsummer Night's Dream on a hot summer day, and just being shut away in this dark little room in this bungalow at the top of the hill in Placentia, Newfoundland. And I don't know, it was the darkness of that story that really appealed to me, and Macbeth and so on. And yes, I was reading Shakespeare at that age. I was just interested, and I went on to read things like to Jane Eyre, and anything by the Brontes really, and anything from the 19th century England, like Scrooge was one of my favorites. So I could go on and list all of the stuff that I was, before I ever went away to attend university and study the Gothic. I had read and seen tons of what I'll call dark fiction, dark literature, dark films, and I was really keenly interested in that. And I'll sort of get away from the academic side. I could weave a story about how I studied in university. I ended up creating my own program of study in university at Acadia, in which I studied a lot of British and Canadian and American Gothic. But I'll sort of skip all that, because I went on to study it for my graduate work in my PhD studies, I should say, at Memorial. And I had a great teacher there named Elizabeth Miller that I'll mention. She passed away just a few years ago. The Gothic, I'll sum it up this way: it's darkness, but it's more about destabilization. Somebody asked me once when the Hush Sisters came out, like, what's the difference between Gothic and horror? And to me, horror is more about exploitation, and Gothic is more about exploration in terms of who we are as a society, as people. And in terms of Newfoundland Gothic, I had never read anything like that before. That was sort of because Newfoundland Gothic. I mean, Newfoundland itself it's a strange little place. There's a lot of darkness in those coves and in those streets of St. John's and places like Forest Road, which if I get into the Hush Sisters. But in rural Newfoundland, which is what I started out knowing best and talking about best, and best from somewhat of a distance, um, it's just the strange ways that people have, the way they talk to each other, the way they think. And the church was part of that, that there's sort of dark sort of rituals of sacrifice sometimes, and the prayers. And probably the scene that people remember the most is the rosary scene, and that comes directly from every time uh, we would get a thunderstorm. My mother would command us all to gather in the living room and get down on our hands and knees and pray until the thunder went away. And somehow magically it always went away. So we all associated that with.
Sorry.
Okay. Associated. See, that's the devil right there. Little poke. But anyway, so I'm growing up with those sorts of influences. I mean, having to say the rosary every time there was a storm, or people have these strange sayings. I mean, it wasn't just my mother; it was my grandmother and my father had this dark sense of humor, and he told ghost stories. So I think that's where it comes from. But I think Gothic to me is more of, I think a lot of Gothic writers, people like Mary Shelley and Charlotte Bronte and so on, I think they were just kind of looking at life through a different lens. Uh, but I think also not making up things that weren't there so much as saying what if about the things that are there that not only could hurt you but could just sort of upend your life a little bit. Anyway, I'm going on a little bit. So
no, that's okay.
Question.
Okay. So where does the idea of healing come from for Finton?
Oh,
especially combined with his coming of age.
Oh, well, it was easy till you said that. The healing part is, I really do think that as I wrote this shortly after coming back from British Columbia, where we lived in the Lower Fraser Valley, which talk about it kind of a dark Gothic kind of place, which also has a lot of Christianity, we'll say. There's also a lot of paganism and Wicca, and there was a lot of emphasis on. I remember a lot of people did Reiki, and they were into crystal healing and things like that. And I didn't drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak, but I did try all of these things just because I wanted to experience them. I was at that point in life where I wanted to try things. And when I found that sometimes I was having these strange experiences, like I would walk into a crystal shop, like for the very first time. I wasn't foolish. This happened once. I didn't do it again. But I walked into this crystal shop, and suddenly I felt like the tips of my fingers felt kind of tingly, which I paid no attention to. It was only in hindsight I remember this feeling. But I do remember sort of a pain in the palms of my hand, which is very Jesus-y, I know. Sorry about that. But I literally I remember just getting the ache in my arms. It just felt like somebody. I was only in my very early 30s. I just felt like it was just the onset of arthritis, just suddenly like that, and I had to leave the shop, and suddenly I felt better, and I was like, that's never happened before. So that stayed in my memory. That and Reiki. I did some Reiki. I had some Reiki done to me at the time, and it's not as bad as it sounds. And I did find that it was an interesting spiritual experience to do that. So there is a spiritual quality to this novel, and that I hope comes through. Sometimes it's a bit funny, sometimes it's a bit dark, sometimes it all goes wrong. But at the heart there is a kind of a spirituality at the essence of the novel. So that's part of the healing thing. I think I just wanted to figure out how that might pertain to a kid. Like, so it wasn't enough for me that he comes of age, because everybody comes of age, but the healing ability comes and goes, and it's also aligned with his creativity, not just his faith. All of these things combine, really. and you'll notice that it's after his first communion, I think it is, where he actually loses the ability to heal. In fact, I think it's his first sexual experience as well, so that's part of it. And he also loses his ability to write, which is the thing he wants to do, wants to be in life. So, and gradually these things come back to him, of course, and that's, to me, that's sort of like that happens to all of us in life. I think we start out believing some things, and as life goes on, the world kind of wears us down a little bit. We forget that we used to be we used to be magical. We used to be able to do things with our hearts and our minds and our spirits, and I think you lose that a little bit as you become an adult. And to be honest, Finton Moon started with a crisis of faith that I was having in my own life, and uh, I just wanted to remember back to a time when what it was like to actually have faith in something and what that might look like. So, and it comes and goes, as faith will do. So there you go. If I was sitting there with you right now, I'd probably have a drink. So, thumbs up.
Clamato juice.
Clamato. What's Clamato?
What's the Clamato with you? Okay, this is a completely sort of off sort of what we've been talking about up until now. But
Okay.
who do you see as the good guys and the bad guys in this novel?
I like the idea of that question simply because, number one, I've never thought about it that way before. And also, it kind of helps you understand how you feel about characters. I feel like every character that I write about is the hero of their own story, of course, which is a cliche to say. So I kind of look deeply into it. But I mean, the so-called villains. I mean, obviously, people like Bridie Battenhatch. I mean, I just read a scene where she introduces Finton to swearing, smoking, and drinking all at once, and eventually she is sort of the she becomes her own daughter's pimp in a way.
Well, and she also is really sort of causing him to question the church. And,
yeah,
and, yeah.
Which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, but she thinks it's a good thing, and Finton comes to think of it as a good thing too. But it all amounts to his fall in life, really. How he goes from being this innocent kid to having this loss of innocence. I think Edie, not Edie, what's she called in the novel?
Mrs.
No, the daughter.
Oh, Morgan.
Morgan. You'll have to excuse me. It's been a few years since I read the whole thing start to finish. Morgan, she originally was called Edie because she was named after somebody else, and I'm just going to leave that at that. The idea that she tried to burn her own mother's house down, that comes from reality. So I need to be kind of careful what I said. What I say. Maybe I'll delete that part. But she got called Morgan. Because there's something kind of Arthurian and quest-like in Finton's way of moving through life, and you'll see lots of references there to Excalibur and he's an errant knight in a way.
If I can even just interject, even the fact that he loses the ability to heal, or may lose the ability to heal after his first sexual experience, like, you know, you're drawing on myth there too, you know, the maiden who loses her powers when she's no longer a maiden.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. I mean, I won't extrapolate. It's been so long since I felt inspired to write those scenes that I almost can't really remember what exactly inspired them. I just don't know that from what I was reading at the time and what I had read, because I read voraciously as a child, as Finton does as well. And so those tales of Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and even things like Robin Hood, and those all came to, I don't know. I just wanted to write a big adventure, really, and that's in Finton's mind. I think that's what he's having, is one big adventure. So
we were asking about the good guys and the bad guys.
Well, Finton, I think definitely is a good guy, but I think he has some doubts about how good he actually is, especially when he has these various things happen to him, or things that he does. So that's interesting to me, that the person who's probably the most moral, or the goodest, is one that probably doesn't see him necessarily as the good guy, but wants to be the good guy. I think his father is a hard case. I think he wants to be I think he wants to be good and sees himself as good, but he's a bit of a dark angel, we'll say, in this story. But I think that's the trend. I think Bridie Battenhatch is like a dark angel. I think Sawyer Moon is. I'm not sure there's anything angelic about Sawyer Moon. He does some pretty horrible things, um, and the redemption for him might simply be in the fact that he doesn't necessarily know what he's doing. I think
Mm.
that's what makes him a little bit more complicated than simply good versus
Mm.
bad. Um, as Skeet is just a Skeet. Skeets aren't necessarily bad. They're kind of devilish. Uh, and then Mary Connolly is sort of angelic in her own way, at least in how Finton sees her, but not necessarily in how she treats Finton. But she's under no obligation to treat Finton any better than he gets, really. He just wishes that he had been treated better. I think is the difference there. And then there's Alicia. A lot of people think that Finton should have ended up with Alicia at the end. So, in fact, I'll close off this little side discussion by saying that I I just I know what it's like, I suppose, and I thought Finton's whole thing is he has to escape Darwin. Even when his little discussion with Miss Bridie, sitting at the table having a drink and a smoke and talking about the church, and he said, "I don't think it's ever going to get any better unless I leave here." And I think he was afraid of having attachments that would somehow trip him up or slow him down or force him to stay there or trap him. He wanted freedom and to bring somebody with him. I mean, he did ask her to go with him, but I didn't feel like it was in a romantic sense so much as he just wanted to rescue her too.
She could have stood to get out too.
Yeah, and I think what he really wanted was for her to rescue herself, but she just wasn't there yet. She wasn't ready. So it never really felt like it was in the cards for Alicia and Finton to end up together. I think that would have closed off the book in a neat, tidy way that would have felt very unsatisfying to me, and I would have had nightmares all these years wondering if maybe Finton ended up in a bad relationship. No, that not that she was bad or that he was bad, but maybe it wasn't the right thing. Maybe it wasn't what either one of them needed. So in case you're wondering why it ends that way, and if you had a little bit of heartbreak that he does leave and she doesn't, that's because she's not ready yet. That's a whole other story to be told, really.
The one of the things I was thinking about too was the idea of Newfoundland as, a lot of people have these very romantic notions of living on an island and living in Newfoundland. And can you just talk just a little bit about and I think this comes back to your Newfoundland Gothic idea too, because it does sort of upend a lot of notions that people have about Newfoundlanders being, funny, jokey drunks,
Yeah.
and that's not at all what you're.
No.
Well, first of all, in a meta kind of sense, you're an amazing writer, and that comes through, and
Thank
there's
you.
nothing, there's nothing stereotypical about you at all. But if you can kind of just talk a little bit about Newfoundland and the kind of Newfoundland that you're depicting in this book that might not seem like the Newfoundland that people see on the tourism commercials.
Yeah, and I think that in the early days of my writing, at least, that was always the thing for me.